Good morning, my friends. This is the Grimflayer. Hope you're doing very, very well today. Wherever you are, whatever you're up to, I hope it's going well for you. We are playing some more Golgari, and we are on the draw here with a frankly great hand. We've got a nice spread of threats and spells, which is all you can really ask for in these blind game ones on a fair deck like this. That said, we have interaction in the form of Inquisition. We have a couple threats, and we have some nice utility with our land bases, so definitely nothing that we can really complain about with a hand like this. Our opponent will keep 7, and they will start us off. Scalding Tarn into Watery Grave. Alright. I think I know what this is. Usually when they're aggressively fetching and shocking, when you see the Watery Grave, like, these are all really good indicators of a Death Shadow deck. So that's what we are expecting right now, although of course we don't know for sure quite yet. They're going to take away our Inquisition. Alright. So that means maybe they have answers for our threats, maybe they have just more discard spells to follow, so they take our turn 1 play. Or maybe they have some secrets to protect. If it is indeed Grixis Death Shadow, they might have some cards like Stubborn Denial and Temur Battle Rage that they don't want us to know about. Pretty clearly just take the window to resolve the tap land there. Abrupt Decay is a good draw. It's an answer to Shadow that cannot be countered. Definitely not too displeased with that one. Yeah, they're fetching so aggressively here and shocking so aggressively that it is certainly a Death Shadow deck at this point. They've got another Inquisition that's quite good for them. Now they're going to take away our best grindy card. Wow. Okay. Thought sees us. Take away the Ooze. Alright. So they think they can beat an Abrupt Decay, which means maybe they have a Delve threat to play next turn. That is my first thought. If they do have a Delve threat, this Maelstrom Pulse was a good draw. So not much we can do here except play our lands out as painlessly as possible. They're going to cycle a Street Wraith, okay? They make a land drop. They play a Serum Visions. They play another Serum Visions. Alright, they're certainly doing a lot of things. A lot of plays being made over there, a lot of actions being taken. 1 black mana. And yep, sure enough, they're going to delve away a bunch of cards, leaving only their Serum Visions in the yard, and they have a Gurmag Angler. So our reads have been pretty spot on throughout, and our draws have been okay too. This Maelstrom Pulse, like I said last turn, really nice draw here, and we still have the Decay in hand if they ever deploy a Death Shadow. That will be a nice answer to it. Or will it? It's going to get stripped away. So, man, they've cast 4 discard spells in the first 4 turns. Pretty good for them. They've also cast a couple Serum Visions, a 3rd one now. And they've also cast a 6-mana creature, all over the course of 4 short turns. So they are certainly going off, and to top it all off, they have a Death Shadow. Now, this is classic Grixis Death Shadow. They're going to rip your hand apart. They're going to deploy wildly undercosted threats, whether it be a 5/5 for 1, or right now this is a 5/5 for 1, but it's going to grow. So while we do still have a lot of really good draws, they are kind of not drawing us over there. Let's see what we can pull out of the top. And it's a swamp. That's pretty bad. We're going to deploy the Field of Ruin there, number 1, because they already know about it, number 2, because Field of Ruin is actually pretty good against them. I would never expect them to play a basic mountain, so it is at least realistically taking them off of red at some point in the game. That said, we can't afford to fire it up here. We have to fire up the Hissing Quagmire. Now, our opponent can read. They know this has Death Touch. They probably have an answer for it. Just seems like that type of game. We have to make them have it, though. Sure enough, there's a Fatal Push. Alright, they've just kind of got it all going on over there. And, yeah, we're going to take 5. We still do have a few turns to draw out of it. Collective Brutality. Okay. Not a very good one. This card is actually something that we normally will be interested in boarding out. It just doesn't kill anything they have, and the life drain can actually be completely counterproductive. In many cases, that's what it will be. And in this case, the life drain does not feel good. We don't have any other threats where decreasing their life total from 8 to 6 is relevant, and of course it just grows the shadow, rendering our own life gain neutral the first turn they hit us with a shadow, and then actively bad with subsequent hits. So, what do we do here? Do we hold this card or do we play it? Here's what I decided to do. I thought about playing it, then I'm like, no, let's just be mana efficient here. We're going to try to take them off of red. Sure enough, they don't have a basic mountain. And then we're going to spot check their hand. So this could just be a total whiff, but the card isn't doing us any favors otherwise. And hey, they have a Teamer Battle Rage, so we get to take that out of their hand. Not that they could cast it anyway, but that's still good. It would have been perhaps even better to hit a Stubborn Denial out of their hand there, but getting some kind of one-for-one trade with the Brutality feels fine, even if it was a little redundant at the moment. Doesn't feel redundant anymore because they can certainly go fetch a red duel there. We're going to take the hit. They don't crack the fetch land, and I think that makes sense because this is a 2-turn clock anyway. Fetching and shocking doesn't change that, and this lets them play around another Field of Ruin on a red land. Tasigur is a quite nice draw here, actually. So, because there's no Planeswalker in the yard, like a Tarmogoyf would just be a 4/5 anyway. A Scavenging Ooze can't outsize the shadow yet, at least this turn. So, no one creature that we have can outsize the shadow, especially because they have that fetch land sitting around. So, Tasigur is actually really nice here because this is a creature that allows us to, hopefully, get an Abrupt Decay back, which is just about our best out here. So what we're planning to do is we probably have to block, because if we just try to be greedy and take the hit, they could have Teamer Battle Rage in hand. They could just have Lightning Bolt in hand. We're probably going to have to block here, activate the Tasigur, get the Abrupt Decay back. But they top decked a Dismember, which is the actual perfect draw for them, because it is the only card in their deck that I know of anyway that kills our Tasigur and grows the shadow to exactly a 10/10. So we can activate Tasigur in a response, but it just doesn't matter because they just have lethal. So, you know, all credit to our opponent because they played it really well. I think they made the exact right choices at every turn as far as I could see. But man, was that a nut draw. It really was. And we had a good opening hand, and we had some pretty respectable top decks, and they just got us. This is just kind of what Grixis Death Shadow can do. So, nothing we could have done differently as far as I can see. That said, this matchup is still not a bad one. I think we are slightly favored, and if anything, we probably become even more slightly favored after sideboard. So, yeah, no point dwelling on that one. Let's just go to the side and see what we can do. Alright everybody, we are back, and we are sideboarding against Grixis Death Shadow. We're going to be on the play. So just a couple kind of theoretical points to make at the beginning of this. Number one, play versus draw can matter. If you want to get really technical with your sideboarding, you might want to do things a little differently on the play than you would on the draw. And number two, this is going to be a matchup where there are some definites, some maybes, and as far as what comes out, we're going to be doing a lot of trimming at the edges. There's no one archetype of cards that's totally bad here. So let's first look at what might come in, and then we'll take it from there. Engineered Explosives, I would consider this a maybe bordering on no. obviously it's a pretty clean answer to a Death Shadow that can't be Stubborn Denial. That's great. But one principle to consider in this matchup is you don't want too many things that only kill Death Shadow in the matchup. And then you just die to some really proactive interaction on their end with a lot of discard spells backed up by a Stubborn Denial, and you just die to a Gurmag Angler beating you down. So for that reason, I'll put it in the maybe, but it's bordering on no. Nihil Spellbomb is good. Attacking their graveyard is pretty nice. And of course, this is an attrition matchup, so the fact that it replaces itself is necessary. We won't bring in Surgical. I wouldn't bring in Leyline. I don't want to bring in anything that doesn't cantrip or otherwise get me value as far as graveyard hate goes. That said, they can fill up the grave really quick. It can be a little tough to just crack a spell bomb in case they have a delve threat. That can be a little awkward in places. So let's say one's maybe, one's yes. Seems a little arbitrary, but again, we're kind of trimming at the edges. We're kind of bringing in... At the end of this, we should have a really diverse 60. It's not like all of these are good, all of these are bad. Let's roll. It's just not that type of matchup. Having noted just now that we don't want too many things that only kill Death Shadow, Maelstrom Pulse is fantastic because it can kill the shadows, it can 2-for-1 them, it can kill the big threats, it can kill the planeswalkers. Now, 3-mana sorcery speed against Stubborn Denial, even a natural stub without Ferocious, that can be clunky. So again, it's kind of a cool matchup. I love interactive decks, obviously, and it's kind of cool against them that every card has its strengths and weaknesses, but for me, Pulse's strengths are high enough that they come in. Golgari Charm is a no. It's just a no. Regen is live, but yeah, we don't want to play that type of game. So that's a no. I'm going to put Fulminator Mage and Choke over here in their own category that we will assess when we look at everything else. They're both potentially very good. Grixis Death Shadow plays a very fragile mana base. A Fulminator can be very strong, and Choke can be very, very strong. And in tandem, they're pretty nice. Like, you Fulminator their Blood Crypt and you choke out the rest of them. Maybe they're just operating off a swamp at best. Now, that's kind of a Christmas Land scenario. These can also be bad top decks if they have stripped away our hand and they're going off. So, kind of tough to assess, in my opinion. Nissa Vital Force, she's clunky. She's way clunkier than Maelstrom Pulse, which I just explained can be clunky against Stubborn Denial, but you know what? She comes in. She can just, as a hasty threat, end the game. Literally that turn, potentially. They play really fast and loose with their life total, and out of a straight Golgari deck, they will not be expecting any kind of a haste threat. It's not Jund, so they're not playing around Bloodbraid Elf and Lightning Bolt. Like, they're going to go really low with their life total. Nissa can punish them. She obviously grinds really well. So, I think she's a for sure. Obstinate Baloth is a reasonable card here. They might play Liliana of the Veil. They might just Thoughtseize him out of the field. It's reasonable, for sure. No to Extraction. No to Duress, because we are going to trim away at some discard, and I would just rather have Inquisition and Thoughtseize. No to Brutality. We're going to be taking some out. It's just not that good in the matchup. Damnation, Kalidas, Languish. So this is not a matchup for Kalidas because their threats just all outsize him, and he's going to cost more mana to play than all of their threats. He's just outclassed, and his effects don't do all that much. The chain of zombies can be nice, but it's just not realistic to take over the game with Kalidas in this matchup. Damnation and Languish. So we have enough to bring in, and enough that's good in the main deck that I'm going to say no to Damnation. I mean, Languish is actually just bad here. Damnation is worth maybe considering, but I'm going to say no. I think we've got enough. We're already going to struggle for enough slots, right? So we're going to bring in these three. We're going to consider these 3 in the maybe, and then we have kind of the X factor of do we get on the choke and fulminator plan or not. So, kind of some complicated sideboarding here, but stay with me, and of course let me know what you think when all is said and done. There's a lot of debate to be had here, potentially. So what don't we like? I think Collective Brutality is going to be our first cut. The card still has utility, as we saw Game 1, spot checking for Teamer Battle Rage, for Stubborn Denial is fine. It kills a Snapcaster. If they go really, really low, it can finish them off, or if we go wide, it can, punch through the last 2 damage. Still probably our worst card in the main. Abrupt Decay is good, but kind of limited because it doesn't hit the big stuff. That said, it's still going to hit Snapcaster if we need it to, still hits Death Shadow, obviously, is the big one, still hits Liliana's, and can't be countered. So for that reason, we don't want too many things that can only kill Shadow. Even though it's more expensive, I would rather cut a Fatal Push over a Decay. So let's start by trimming a push. I think Trophy is fantastic here. They only play 2 basics, probably. This is going to hit everything. This is a great, great matchup for it. So right now we're at 60, and in my opinion, this is a reasonable 60 to submit. But I think we want to be trimming away some number of our targeted discard spells too. Like I said, we're going to trim at the edges. This is an attrition matchup. This is kind of like Spirits in one sense. We really need to retain access to some number of discard. If we just say we want only threats and answers, we're going to cut all our discard, they are going to tempo us out of the game. Just like Spirits can do so with Spell Queller and with cards like Rattle Chains, they can do it with big threats, discard into big threats backed up by Stubborn Denial. So we need to retain access to some number of discard, partially to disrupt those sequences and partially because it's just a really mana-efficient play. I like just kind of hedging like this. I think that seems totally fine as a starting point. Now, we could just do this. We could just say we're going to cut 2 discard spells, we're going to bring in our land hate, and we're going to call it good. And I think that is good. I think this is a really reasonable 60. That said, if you want to make further changes, I think all 3 of these are viable, and from there it would just be a matter of taste. You could say, all right, we will diversify our threats, maybe bring out a Tasigur for a Baloth, play around the legendary rule a little bit, and then we could cut another couple discard spells for these things. That all seems perfectly reasonable to me. So that's reasonable, and so is being a little bit more conservative like this, or anything in between. So maybe play draw changes that a little bit, maybe preference changes that a little bit, maybe knowledge of the opponent's deck list changes that a little bit, but sideboarding should look something like that. So let's go to Game 2 and see if we can claw our way back into this matchup against Death Shadow. Alright, my friends, we are back here for Game 2. We're on the play, and our hand is completely unkeepable. It is a mess. It's got a lot of high curve stuff and only 1 land. And insult to injury, the land is colorless, so clear mulligan. Oh my goodness. Okay. Already looking pretty bad here. Against an attrition deck, you obviously don't want to keep a land with only 1 spell. But our opponent's keeping 7. So if we go to 5, are we just too far behind to possibly come back? We still have a lot of really good cards in this matchup. We have a lot of really good top decks. They kept 7. If we go to 5, we're already putting ourselves so far down. I think we're supposed to keep this. Could be wrong. Tarmogoyf on top, huh? The Goyf is on top. Sure. Player Hissing Quagmire, pass. Prepare to be wrecked. Well, hey. They play a blue-red land, so no turn 1 Thoughtseize. They're going to cycle, they're going to Serum. So they're getting a lot of, they're seeing a lot of cards here. That's definitely good for them. But, hey, at least they have not discarded us into oblivion quite yet. So, things are looking up just a tad. They will, however, shock in a black land and fatal push the Goyf. Then they're going to Thought Scour, milling Surgical Extraction, and Bloodstained Mire. So, you know, this is the third video, not quite in a row, but close enough in a row. There was Mardu Pyromancer and Dimir Control. Everybody's bringing in Surgical against me. Maybe it's better than I think it is. It certainly felt pretty bad getting my trackers surgicaled by Dimir, that was for sure. So, who knows? Tasigur is a fine draw overall. It's a little clunky there. We would have loved to have been able to run out a threat there. So we just have to pass. We're going to run out the Field of Ruin because that's a reasonable play on the end step here. If it looks like the play, and of course we don't have anything else to do. They're finally going to start Thought Seizing us. There goes Tasigur. Thought Scour, so they think they can beat a Maelstrom Pulse. Thought Scour gets Fatal Push and Snapcaster Mage in their yard. I'm pretty happy to see those go by the wayside. And Serum Visions, so they're really doing a lot of stuff, seeing a lot of cards over there. And yes, I will be interested in Field of Ruining them on the end step. And I chose to hit the Blood Crypt because they have one of each dual land, so no one is better than the other in terms of just taking them off of a color. Blood Crypt is the best for two reasons there. Number one, it means if we draw another Field of Ruin, we can probably take them off red. And number two, if we draw a Choke, that was the best hit. So, feels like a decision that doesn't mean much, but every decision matters, so we gotta play to our outs. And we're just drawing lands, so that's not good. At least Hissing Quagmire has, Death Touch is actually pretty nice when we're on the back foot in a matchup like this against all of their threats. They're all oversized. The fact that we can potentially trade cleanly with them is good. And they'll often be able to push or bolt these, so they are vulnerable, but hey, that still forces them to spend a card, and now we have a backup one. So they find a Death Shadow. And they have 4 cards still in hand, and they've had a lot of card selection with a couple Serum Visions. So, ooh, Nissa's a good one. Nissa is a good one. So, if they have a Stubborn Denial, neither play is good. Running the Pulse out, getting it stubbed, and then they get to have free reign on the crackback feels bad. Obviously, Nissa gets Stubborn Denialed. She would be vulnerable to stub even if they didn't have Ferocious. But since they have Ferocious, doesn't feel that bad to run her out. The third option here is to just pass and hold up our Hissing Quagmire activation, but that doesn't seem good. They have 4 cards in hand. They're going to draw a 5th. Bolt or push is pretty likely, and we need to be proactive here. We are definitely behind. We need to get back ahead. So this is the most proactive play. It's bad against Stubborn Denial, but so is anything else we can do. And she resolves. Cool. So that's step 1. We're kind of clawing our way back into some card advantage here. And buying back a threat. They do have the Bolt, and end step they will spend it on Nissa. So that actually doesn't feel very bad at all for me. That's one fewer way they can deal with our Hissing Quagmires. And yeah, it means they get to pressure our life total more, but we're still at 20. This is the first hit of the game we're going to take. Down to 16, pass. Alright, so Nissa did her job there. Assassin's Trophy is a fine draw. It's a fine draw. So here, before they can see any more cards, I'm just going to try to get their threat off of the table. We're going to start out with a Maelstrom Pulse because they know about it and because it's our sorcery speed spell. Stubborn Denial is going to take care of that, but we have an Assassin's Trophy as well. We're going to do that while that's still on the stack to play around Snap Stubborn Denial, which was potentially live for them. Assassin's Trophy will resolve. We're going to get their threat off the field. Feels pretty good. I'm going to hold on to this Catacombs for all of the usual reasons, especially because they could have a Liliana of the Veil +1 here, which we would, it would be nice to have something that's not Tarmogoyf to throw away to that. They find another Shadow, and they play another land, so they are down to 1 card in hand. So we're battling through their resources, but they still do have a Shadow, and we still are drawing blanks, basically. So we're going to play the Tarmogoyf. Looks like it lines up well, but of course this fetch land means that the Shadow is an 8/8 whenever they want it to be. Here we have to play our own fetch land. Feels awkward. It's worse for Tracker that we had to play this, and it's, you know, it would have been nice to resolve the tap land while we could, but here we have to threaten the Quagmire activation, which is why we have to play that fetch there. Alright, they're getting in with a Shadow. So here we really have to fire up the Quagmire, because we're never really going to get to the chance where we can fire up both in one turn. So the first thing to do is to fire this up, try to move to block, see if they have a play. They're going to dismember the Hissing Quagmire. Alright, fair enough. They didn't pay life to do so. Interesting. So we're going to take the block. Alright. I don't know if we should have taken that block or not. It's just like if they had a stubborn denial, we're just dead. That's the problem. That is the problem here. So, yeah, in that land sequencing we were forced to undertake last turn is proving to be very awkward here, because now we cannot deploy the Tarmogoyf while holding up Quagmire. And here I think it is better to hold up Quagmire, and it scared him off. Scared him off of the attack, so that's pretty nice for us. Gives us a little breathing room. Alright. Scavenging Ooze, huh? Again, we can't really go shields down as far as the Quagmire is concerned. Ooze is the better play because it's not realistically going to play around Snapcaster yet. They'll be able to sequence around the Ooze pretty well for now, because we are kind of pressured into holding up the Quagmire, but we can still eat away at their graveyard little by little. Alright, so potentially sensing that we're getting back into the game, they're going to fire up the Shadow. Once more, we have no choice but to fire up our Quagmire and make them have something. They have something. Alright. We at least get to float a green mana. Again, they have so many good hits with a Snapcaster. We're not realistically playing around that. So we're just eating the creature. We ate our own Tarmogoyf there because Nile Spellbomb, if we draw that, is going to hit their graveyard. So we just want to... Well, so actually that was a mistake. We should have eaten their Death Shadow. Or their Street Wraith. So, yeah, that was a mistake. Shouldn't matter. Very minor thing. We're worried about the bigger stuff here, but yeah, should have eaten one of their things, I believe. Alright, Tireless Tracker is never great in situations like this where you just play it without a land to follow up and you're behind to begin with, but you know, I think just putting some regular creatures onto the board is actually potentially going to be okay. So we are going to get in for 3 because they have better top decks than we do now. They have top decks that can end the game next turn. So we're just going to get in for 3, and because we already had no choice but to just run out our 2 creatures here, this actually leaves them dead to any of our creatures next turn if we draw land. So if we draw land, we can crack a clue, make Tracker a 4-power creature. Ooze can become a 4-power creature by eating a Street Wraith or a Death Shadow. Tarmogoyf's already a 5/6, And if we don't draw a land, we're hopefully drawing something else that's very relevant. So, getting in with the ooze there for 3 actually makes them have a couple things here to stay alive. They take their draw step, and they scoop. Okay. So we don't know exactly what they had. We had some kind of underwhelming several turns there, but this is an example of how Death Shadow, leveraging the extreme power of this card, the extreme power of being able to fetch shock aggressively, Thoughtseize aggressively, play a really low curve with a painful 3-color land base, and still get a lot of benefits out of doing so. Here it kind of came back to bite them, because we just had some subpar sequencing that ended up presenting lethal. So, not the most classic example of grinding them out with Golgari. They actually kind of, their plays lined up better than ours did for most of that game, but we kind of went wide in a weird way at the end of that game, and it was good enough. So, hey, we will take it. A win is a win. Let's go to game 3 and see if we can do it when we're on the draw. All right, my friends, we are here for game 3 on the draw, and this is probably the best hand yet that we've seen in this matchup. Game 1 we had a reasonable hand, but it was a little light on spells, which proved to be pretty rough against their flurry of discard. Game 2 we mulliganed to a very poor 6, and we ended up getting there, but definitely was not a very good 6 to keep. This is a really nice 7 in the matchup. Fatal Push is a good card. Tarmogoyf, this is one of the few matchups where most of their threats can outclass the Goyf, just in terms of sheer size. It's one of the only decks in Modern that can lay claim to that. That said, it's still a fine card to run out on turn 2, and of course both Lilianas are completely fantastic in the matchup. We have the lands to cast all our spells, and Hissing Quagmire has proven to be a must-answer card sometimes for them. So, very happy to keep this 7. I wish we were on the play with a hand like this, but we are not. They're going to open on the good old fetch into Watery Grave for a Thoughtseize. There goes our Tarmogoyf. Interesting. So, definitely expected them to either take our removal spell or a Planeswalker, but we'll see. Maybe they have more discard to follow. We draw a Thoughtseize. That's a really nice draw. That's a really, really nice draw. We see an interesting hand. Alright, so Temur Battle Rage, we kind of played around it a little bit game 2. I should have noted there that they will often side out TBR in a grindy matchup just because it can be dead in hand if you're disrupting them heavily enough. It just doesn't do anything. Kind of like how some combo decks will trim away at their combo consistency pieces against us to bring in some grindy value cards. Same principle applies, but our opponent has left at least one copy in. So we're not going to take that. We could take Death Shadow, but, on paper we have an answer to it with the Fatal Push and with the Liliana the Veil Edict as well. Thought Scour is actually a pretty reasonable take here because it's going to cantrip, it's going to fill up their yard, it's going to make a lot of their other draws better. So I actually considered the Thought Scour, but I ended up taking the Kolaghan's Command away. It's just a really nice 2-for-1 for them. It's much better on the play than on the draw in a match like this. So I think that's a fine take. I certainly could live to regret it. They found another Thoughtseize off the top. Now, I probably would have taken that if they had it, so that's a really nice draw for them. And yeah, there goes our Liliana the Veil. That's pretty much as expected. Swamp is not a great draw here. They're going to fetch all the way down to 10. They've got a Steam Vents. They didn't make a third land drop. Alright, that's... that definitely means they drew more action, obviously, but it still could be okay for us. We'll have to see how it plays out. Drawing more lands, not good. Not very good here. We're going to do the Catacombs here because, number one, we are interested kind of in thinning out our deck at this point. The Fatal Push Revolt trigger is not relevant. Their creatures are either Street Wraiths and Gurmag Anglers, which can't be hit even with a Revolted Push, or they're Snapcasters and Death Shadows, which we don't need a Revolt for. So we're going to thin out the deck a bit. They already know about the Catacombs, so we can seal information. And we also get to preserve our life total as much as we can. We just got to try to jam the Lily, and thankfully she resolves. Yeah, they could have had a Stubborn Denial as their fourth card. Thankfully, they did not. We are immediately interested in cashing her in. Not cashing her in. That usually implies that she's gone. We're going to minus her, get the Tarmogoyf back. This is the type of value play, this type of 2-for-1 that we need. So they do nothing on the end step. Alright, fair enough. Did I miss it? They already spent their Thought Scour. Yep, they already spent their Thought Scour. That makes sense. I was going to say, why didn't they Thought Scour on the end step, or indeed Thought Scour in response to Liliana trying to find a Stubborn Denial? But, yep, they already spent it. My bad, I missed that. Makes sense. Makes sense now. So they find their third land, they're going to aggressively shock and deploy 2 Death Shadows. Alright, so they've got a Teamer Battle Range and 1 Unknown in hand. We're going to untap, and we're going to draw Maelstrom Pulse. Oh, we're so good at Magic, we draw the perfect card. So, cannot complain about that. But do we just blindly fire off the Pulse here into, once again, a possible Stubborn Denial? I don't know. I don't know. So here are the 2 potential plays that make sense. Number 1, we just pulse them. What happens if they have the Stubborn Denial? They counter it, we get to play Swamp Fatal Push, tick the Lily up on Death Shadow, then they get to kill Lily on the Crackback. Then they will untap with Teamer Battle Range in hand plus a new draw. That seems like, so either way we're going to get a Death Shadow off the field, right? So Maelstrom Pulse has the highest upside. If they don't have Shadow, we just get to 2-for-1 them and hold our Fatal Push. That's very good. The safer line is actually to lead on Fatal Push. That way, they're certainly going to Stubborn Denial a Fatal Push if they have the stub. Then we get to Swamp, Maelstrom Pulse both of them away. That is the safer line because it lets us still 2-for-1 them if they have a Stubborn Denial, and if they don't have a Stubborn Denial, we still get to get both Shadows off the board because then we get to pulse the second one. So it doesn't have as high of a ceiling, but in my opinion, it is the better play here. So let's lead on the push. Okay, they don't have stub, so we kind of get punished for taking the safer line. That said, if they had Stubborn Denial there, we could be just dead. So as much as it sucks to kind of have taken away our own opportunity for a 2-for-1, I still think it was the safer and therefore the more correct line in this situation. Maybe I am wrong, maybe I'm overrating the likelihood that they had stub, but maybe I just have PTSD from being Stubborn Denial too many times. I don't know. But either way, certainly an interesting decision point, as is often the case when 2 interactive decks like this meet. We tick up the Lily, and we pass. So our opponent is going to cycle a Street Wraith, they're going to find a Lightning Bolt, they're going to take care of the Last Hope, and they're going to pass. 1 Unknown in hand, still got that Teamer Battle Rage chilling. We draw an Assassin's Trophy. That's pretty good. Definitely not mad to draw an answer of any kind at this stage of the game, especially one that can hit anything they play. We also get to hold up Field of Ruin here. We're holding up either Field of Ruin or Trophy. Remember, we still have this Hissing Quagmire around too. They find a Death Shadow. Alright, so once again, this could be walking into a stubborn denial, but there's no reason not to do it. Stubborn denial's not going to go away. However, it does get through. Feels pretty good. Don't know what their last card is besides Temur Battle Rage, but... Alright, Blooming Marsh is not a good draw. So, here, now it's time to make them have it. Now it's not time to play safely around what they might have. Now it's time to make them have it because we're not dead on the crackback. They don't have a creature, and this is just lethal. This is just lethal if they don't have a removal spell. Perhaps as an ode to how tilting it must have been to have the Temur Battle Rage rotting in hand all game and never getting to use it, they give our Goyf the honor of double strike and trample until end of turn. So we get to have a very, very big Tarmogoat there and end the game in style. So thanks for that, opponent. And thanks for a good game, because that was a nice best of three. We had a really tight game one where they just ripped our hand apart. We almost stabilized, and then they top decked the Dismember for exactly lethal. That was the perfect top deck for them. In game two, we mulliganed. It was really sketchy. They kind of out-sequenced us throughout the game. Not that we made any bad plays per se, but like our stuff was just a little clunky compared to theirs. But then we just kind of played a few creatures and the game was over. Really felt weird. Felt like we faded a fair few draws that they could have had in those last 2 turns or so. But hey, like I identified at the time, that's kind of the price you pay sometimes for really aggressively leveraging your life as a resource. And game 3, we had a really nice back and forth that culminated in our opponent being punished to some degree for keeping this Temur Battle Rage in their deck, because it just represents another card that could have kept them in the game, or indeed could have ended the game earlier if they had been able to sequence differently with some more action early on. Honorable mention here throughout all that to Hissing Quagmire, because this card forced them to spend a lot of removal spells over the course of the series, and indeed proved to be lethal damage here alongside Tarmogoyf. 2/2 attacker is not always the most relevant, but when their life total is nice and low, it certainly can be. Of course, our catch-all removal was fantastic here. Assassin's Trophy, Maelstrom Pulse, some number of Fatal Push staying in because it's just more where that came from, and is still very good against their namesake threat. Yeah, so our removal got us there. Our sideboarding looked pretty good here, even though we didn't see the actual sideboard cards here in game 3. Just the fact, well, one of these is a sideboard card, so maybe this is the one we saw, but just the fact that we trimmed around the edges, we saw only one discard spell, and it was early on. That's actually kind of perfect. We trimmed away one Fatal Push. Maybe we drew this Maelstrom Pulse instead of a push, who knows, but just like, we saw the right types of cards in the right numbers here in game 3, and even though we didn't see a lot of the actual cards we brought in, our progression here was still testament to the kind of nuanced sideboarding that I believe is the best approach to this particular matchup. So, good games, well played by the opponent. Thanks for the style points at the end with the TBR on our Goyf. And thank you all so much for watching. I always appreciate it. I always look forward to your feedback. And please consider subscribing if you enjoy this content. I'm a long ways away from monetization or anything like that, but hey, every little step toward that end goal, it definitely adds up. And more than that, I just appreciate your support in the form of liking, subscribing, and commenting if you have anything that you'd like to say, whether it be suggestions on the matchup, suggestions on my presentation, or maybe some matchups you'd like to see. I play I don't play as many games as I'd like to, of course. Who does? But hey, if there's a matchup you really want to see, maybe I can hunt it down for you. So thanks again, and I hope you have a great day. I will see you for the next one.